Hello everyone, let me adjust my camera here. So I thought since we did not have class, I'd go ahead and still teach you guys the lesson. So today is Monday. Hope you all had a wonderful weekend. Our goal for today, and sorry if my screen is a little off. Here we go. All right, so today's goal is to listen to a read aloud of our weekly stories so that you can read and comprehend 5th grade level informational text on a variety of topics and events. How will you know you have learned this? Well, a couple of reasons. I mainly put our quiz here. If you score 80% or higher on your weekly quiz, that will show that you've comprehended this story. Another way to show that you've learned this is by participating, engaging, and answering the comprehension questions as we move through. One thing I want to talk about before we start was synthesize. So when we synthesize, we've talked about this before, is when you're thinking, it changes as you read or find out new information, and then you form these new ideas. So it's going to look a lot like inferencing, in the sense that you take what you know and what you're learning, and you add those together to get your new understanding of the text or the idea. So some thoughts you may be having is like, at first I was thinking this because of something you knew, right? But then as you're reading, you're like, well, when I was reading, I was thinking this because. So you kind of are changing your thoughts, right, as you're reading and you're learning new information. And then by the end, I was thinking this because I read whatever it may be. So you're taking what you know, adding it to what you're learning, and you form this new idea over this topic or whatever you may be reading. We are going to read an awesome story today. It's called Willie B, A Story of Hope. And I'm going to tell you right off the bat, I have a text-to-text connection. You may too. But this story reminds me a lot of The One and Only Ivan. Now, that's a story, a really great chapter book, but it's also been made into a movie, so you can connect it to either or, whichever one you've read or seen. But it reminds me a lot of that, and if you've seen it or you've read it, you'll understand why I say that. But this is a narrative nonfiction, and narrative nonfiction, we know, tells factual information, facts, something you can prove, but it reads like a story. So it's very cool in the sense that you don't feel like you're learning all these facts, right? Like boom, 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 like boring textbook, right? It's reading like a story to keep your attention, which is really cool. So it's going to go in order, chronological order, what happens in the beginning, middle, and end. And this is going to be a true story. So narrative nonfictions always are usually based on a true life experience. Okay, so you're going to read about this gorilla named Willie B, and this is a true story. You're going to get vivid descriptions, and that's going to help you picture what's going on in the story, places, people, events, and it helps you paint that picture in your head to visualize what's going on. Now, before we read, we always like to set that purpose to give us that reason or that purpose for reading. Helps us be better readers, helps us pay attention to the text better because we want to answer the questions that we may have. But think about the story, think about the genre, and I want you to think about what do you already know about gorilla behavior. So you're going to put that in your KWL chart. What do you already know about gorilla behavior? Maybe you know a lot, maybe you know very little. Put what you know. And then tell me what you want to know about gorilla behavior. You can pause this video, fill out your KWL chart on a piece of paper at home, and then come back to the video and move on. Alright, so you've filled out your KWL chart, you've come back to the video, and I have 3 big questions I want you to think about as we're reading, okay? What surprises you? You're going to learn things, hopefully, about gorillas that really surprise you. So think about that. Use your piece of paper at home, jot down anything that surprises you as we're reading. What did the author think I already knew? So the author is going to assume you already know things about gorillas, know things about zoos, okay? And then what challenge changed or confirmed what I already knew? So that's the synthesize, right? You think you already know something, but you read something else and it makes you change, right? It makes you have a new perspective or a new idea. So think of those 3 questions as we are reading through our story, okay? So this is our story. It's called Willie B, A Story of Hope. So here we go. I'm going to go 1 page at a time here, okay? All right, before we start though, I do want you guys to see something. So you have this picture right here. I see a gorilla. He looks like he is older, right? He looks like he's older, and I can guess that this is Willie B on the cover, okay? And then on the next page, I see a baby gorilla with these 2 men. And I know that sometimes humans raise wild animals in places like zoos or rehabilitation centers. And so putting this information together of what I already know, I understand I'm probably going to learn about how Willie B was raised from this little gorilla you see here into this big gorilla by humans, okay? So we have our first text feature, a picture with a caption. It says, James Morgan, mayor of Birmingham, Alabama, holds young Willie while Atlanta's mayor, William B. Hartsfield, looks on. Captured in the jungles of Africa in 1961. A 3-year-old western lowland gorilla was on his way to the United States. His days of playing among the trees in Cameroon were over. Named after the then mayor of Atlanta, William B. Barry Hartsfield, Willie B. found himself in a new home, a 25 by 40 foot enclosure of concrete and glass at the Grant Park Zoo in Atlanta, Georgia. So they captured this gorilla, and he went from being outdoors in the trees and all of that to a concrete and glass enclosure, okay, in the zoo. In the early days, Willie B's zookeepers went into his cage to wrestle and play with him. Just as gorillas in the wild play with one another, the keepers tickled and chased him. But when they left after each play session, Willie B tried to follow them out the door. As he grew older and stronger, the gorilla nearly tore his playmates' clothes off in an attempt to keep them from leaving. Obviously, it was no longer safe for the keepers to be inside the cage with the gorilla. From then on, the only thing Willie B had to play with was a rubber tire hanging by a chain in the middle of his cage. And every night when the keepers locked up the zoo, Willie B was sent to his night pen all alone. So imagine how he felt being in this jungle with all of the other gorillas and then being put in this enclosure where now he's so big they can't be in there with him. So he's feeling very, I would think, very lonely, right? Soon, Willie B grew to be a pot-bellied, barrel-chested, full-grown silverback gorilla. Why would they call him a silverback gorilla, do you think? Do you think maybe because he had silver on his back? At 6 feet tall and weighing more than 400 pounds, Willie towered over most of his keepers. His massive head sat upon his 40-inch round neck. All day long, visitors came to stare at the huge gorilla, and unlike gorillas in the wild, Willie B stared back. So we're already comparing and contrasting. Okay, we're already comparing and contrasting him with wild gorillas, right? So unlike gorillas in the wild, Willie B stared right back. So that is how already we know he's different from wild gorillas. He's staring back at these humans. Why do we think that gorillas in the wild wouldn't stare back at humans? I'm thinking maybe it's because they're shy. They don't know what humans are, so they don't look back. That's just what I'm guessing. He passed the time people watching. If he found visitors who particularly interested him, the great gorilla invited them to play with him. He walked towards the spectators, hitting the bars with his elbows, and encouraged them to play chase. When the visitors left each night, Willie B gathered up anything he could find: sticks, rope, hair, fruit peels, pieces of tile he had removed from his cage, and sometimes bits of trash. Then the giant silverback carried his fistfuls of treasures into his night room, set them down, and fell asleep with them beside his head. That's sweet. Sometimes Willie B would offer one of these objects to a zookeeper, usually as a trade for his favorite snack, fruit treats. Another favorite of Willie B's was his daily cup of milk. As the keepers poured the milk into a cup, Willie B would raise his arms above his head and bark in excitement. In anticipation of the treat, the heavyweight gorilla would run around his pen, causing the walls and floors to shake. So I'm thinking something that's really surprising me is that he takes a cup of milk like a human. I think that's kind of surprising. Day after day, Willie watched the people who were watching him. He particularly liked the gum chewers because Willie B loved the sweet taste of gum. If he noticed someone was chewing, he would sit directly in front of that person. Holding a steel bar of the cage in each hand, he'd push his nose in between the bars and stare. While he stared, he pretended to be chewing gum himself. The zoo visitors often asked zookeeper Charles Horton if Willie had gum in his mouth. As soon as Charles explained that it was Willie's way of communicating that he would like some, the visitors almost always began to search through their pockets or purses to find a piece for Willie B. Charles always removed the wrapper and handed the gum to Willie, and then everyone watched the gum-chewing gorilla. Although Charles never went into the cage with Willie, the two still played games together. One activity they both enjoyed was the kind of game of boo. When Charles walked down the aisle between the glass and the bars, Willie would sit in the back corner of his cage, looking up and down and acting generally uninterested. Then, once the keeper got closer, Willie B would jump up and charge him, as silverbacks do in the wild, but in a playful way. Charles always ran away, acting more afraid than he really was. As Charles ran, he could hear Willie B chuckling with satisfaction. Willie B and Charles also liked to play chasing games and tug of war. They even pretended to wrestle by mimicking each other's action through the glass partition. One of Willie's favorite activities was to play in a tub of water. He would hop into the tub and splash around it like a little kid. With his legs hanging over one end, he would lie back, raking the water over himself. When the tile floors became wet, it was slip and slide time. Willie would run across the wet floor, plop down on his rear end, and start spinning until he crashed into a wall. Then he would get up, race to the other side of the cage, and do it all over again. So again, something that's surprising me is all these things he's doing that I've done as a kid. He didn't have a playmate, so Willie B sometimes entertained himself with something as simple as a paper towel. First, he got a paper towel, good and wet, and then he wrung it out. Next, he carefully straightened it, held his head up, and laid the towel across his face. He sat like that for a while, then he wiped his face. When he finished using the towel as a washcloth, he blew his nose in it. Finally, Willie B simply opened wide and ate his well-used and slightly gross paper towel. Willie was also quite the party animal, but because he was born in the wild, his actual birthday was unknown. The zoo recorded his birthday as May 8, 1958, a combination of his estimated age and the date of his arrival at the zoo. Each year, Willie B's birthday was celebrated in a big way, with free admission to the zoo and a party complete with streamers, balloons, and treats. Willie B usually received a birthday basket filled with his favorite fruits: melons, grapes, kiwis, and strawberries. The zoo staff and visitors sang happy birthday and blew out the candles on his birthday cake. They served a bakery cake to the public and a special gorilla cake to the birthday gorilla. On his 25th birthday, a local company donated a colored television set which hung from the ceiling outside his enclosure. People asked which television show Willie preferred. Did the big gorilla enjoy a drama of soap operas, the action of a football game, or a good movie? A test was set up in hopes of finding the answer. 3 television sets were placed in his viewing area, each with a different channel on. Supplied with snacks, a man sat behind the middle television set observing Willie B. Instead of watching any of the shows, the gorilla simply stared at the man eating his food. Clearly, Willie B preferred people watching. So perhaps at the zoo, we are the most entertaining show of all. So that's all the time I have for this recording. I will finish this story tomorrow when we come to class. So we'll start on page 306 when we come back tomorrow. Okay? Thank you for listening.